beginning. Downtown, Petco Park, a new beginning. Let's go. Started back rocking the Browns. Ever since we've been knocking them down. Baby said she wanna go to the game. Taught her how to say Padre gang. Started back rocking the Browns. Ever since we've been knocking them down. Mitchell and Ness with the old school name. All of the homies holler Padre gang. Yeah, that.
And good day, everybody. Welcome to episode 186 of the Talking Friars podcast and YouTube show. I'm your host, Ben Fadden, here today with a special guest. He's been on already a couple times, MLB.com's Jim Callis. Jim, thank you so much for hopping on the show.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me, Ben.
Yeah, so before we get started here, this episode is brought by GAGLIONE Bros, famous cheesesteaks and garlic fries. They're located inside Petco Park in Mission Gorge and Point Loma. Those are their two locations outside Petco. And you can visit gaglionebros.com for their entire menu, great cheese and garlic fries. And if you're going to the game against the Diamondbacks, they are there by the Bally Sports San Diego pregame, postgame broadcast booth down the third baseline. So feel free to hit them up there. All right, with Jim, we're going to be talking about C.J. Abrams, James Wood, some MLB Draft Combine stuff. I was there last Friday. Jim was there as well. And so first off, let's just get started here with C.J. Abrams. He was called up yesterday because Manny Machado obviously is hurt. The good news, though, is it looks like he's probably not going to go on the IL based on things we're hearing. And he's under and he's walking through the clubhouse without a. That's good news. But as of now, Abrams is up. He's playing shortstop. And so my question for Jim here, the numbers in El Paso with AAA, they were good. He was sitting over 300. The power I thought was better, but it's El Paso, not the major leagues. I guess my question is, do you think the Padres were ready to bring him up, or this is more of, well, I know it's an emergency, obviously, but are they actually comfortable in him playing every day at the big league level, or was this just forced on them? Like, do you think they
Yeah,
needed another month of at bats, or preferably they wanted another month of at bats for him down there, or it would have been a couple weeks and then they would have called him up anyway?
yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. That would be a question. The Padres would be able to answer that a little bit better than me. But I think the thing with CJ, I mean, I do think this was dictated by Machado getting hurt. But the thing to remember about CJ is with the pandemic and then him getting hurt last year. I looked this up right before I came on. He only has 452 at bats in the minor leagues. I mean, he doesn't even really have a full season of at bats in the minor leagues. So I think in a perfect world, you would have let him get some, more at bats in AAA. That said, even though CJ's numbers weren't great in San Diego and the 60 at bats or so he got, I didn't think he looked overmatched. I mean, he wasn't, crushing home runs or, hitting 300, but he also wasn't striking out, excessively either. So I thought for a guy who had very little experience when they had him up before, he kind of held his own. I mean, obviously the batting average you wish to be higher. It wasn't like great numbers, but he didn't look to me that despite his, I can't imagine. This would be interesting. Like recent years, how many high school players have had less than 500, even I think in his case it was less than 400 at bats when they first got called up to the big leagues. It can't be very many.
Right. Did you watch anything of him in AAA when he was down there? Like, did he make any adjustments or anything, or it was just purely the Padres just wanted him to get more at bats there?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I haven't watched a lot of him in El Paso just because we've been doing so much with the draft right now,
Right.
and the Padres aren't one of the teams that I hone in on to do top 30 lists. But no, I mean, I think even though they had him up earlier, again, it was injuries dictating that situation. I think in a perfect world, if you're the Padres, you'd like to have success at the big league level. And you like CJ to be able to spend most of the season in AAA and get at bats because he just hasn't played that much, and then maybe you call him up toward the end of the season. But I think it's a testament to how talented CJ is, and even though he has very very little experience, he's been able to kind of hold his own and not look overmatched by big league pitching. And he's still 21 years old, right?
Right. Yeah. Very young. Yeah. Um, with James Wood, he's down there in the minors, obviously, and he's another really young prospect for the Padres. Can you give an update for the listeners and the audience of what's going on with him? Because I've looked at his game logs. I was looking at him yesterday, and he was with Lake Elsinore. He was dealing with those injuries, and then he got sent to the rookie league, right? The Arizona Complex League for the Padres, and then got put back in Lake Elsinore. So I was kind of confused on what's happening with him.
Yeah, and I don't know the specifics on that because again, I don't handle the Padres on day-to-day basis, and we've been swamped with the draft. My guess is that was just a procedural move. Like there's sometimes you make procedural moves in the minor leagues. Again, without knowing, I don't know if the injuries were bothering him a little bit, and maybe they were going on a road trip, and they're like, you know what? Instead of going on the road, let's send him to our complex in Peoria for a week, and we can have the trainers look at him. He can play a few games in ACL, and then we'll send him back to Low A. But I mean, even though he's only played, I think it's what about 23 games this year. It's been pretty encouraging. I mean, he's making contact. I mean, and we've talked about him before. You know, he's a guy who, from a tool standpoint, his tools were about as good as anybody's in last year's draft. He just had a rough spring at IMG Academy, and guys really questioned the bat, and that's why he went in the second round where he did. I mean, he was an overslot guy, and I think I told you before. Like I've talked to guys in the Padres system who say there are people in the Padres system who think the two best prospects in the system are number one CJ Abrams, and then there are guys who would take James Wood over everybody else. And that was even when Mackenzie Gore hadn't graduated from prospect status. Guys liked him more than Mackenzie Gore, Robert Hassel, Luis Campusano, and that's based on a very small sample. But that's the kind of tools we're talking about, and I think it's encouraging that his strikeout rate I think has been about 20%. He's actually got more walks than strikeouts. If James Wood makes contact at a rate where he's only striking out 20% of the time, then James Wood is probably going to be a star because the tools are so good. Like I think the Padres would gladly take 20% contact, 20% strikeout rate. Yeah, we'll take that because then then he's probably going to go 30-30 for you in the big leagues.
Right. Because I also noticed with him is that he has wheels too. It's not like he's this big guy that's, power is that's it. He can definitely do everything, really. I've seen even his defense has improved, right?
Yeah, no, like I said, I think from a physical standpoint, he would be on the very short list of the most gifted players in last year's draft. He's 6'7", 240. But it's not just hey, he moves well for his size. I mean, he does move well for size, but like he's a plus runner. It's not just hey, he's this big hulking guy and he's got average speed, which moves well for size. I mean, he can run, he can throw, he's got huge power when he connects, and he's connecting more consistently. So you're looking at a guy who I think part of it depends on what else you have in the big leagues when he gets there. Could he play center? Yeah, he might have a chance to play center. And if not, his arm definitely fits in right and he covers ground. So he's exciting. I hope, I know the Padres hope. I hope he stays healthy. So over the last 3 months in the minor league season, he can get, another 70 games worth of at bats and get going on a more consistent basis. But so far, so good. I think, he wasn't a guy that you were necessarily going to look at the stats at the lower levels, but I think he's hit better than you would have expected right off the bat.
Mhm. Now moving to Esteury Ruiz, he was brought up from AA to AAA recently, and he's really interesting. Obviously, a lot of Padre fans are interested, and some even I know this is a big stretch, and probably fans just being reactionary, but the center field position for the Padres this year hasn't been great offensively, like consistently. And some fans have wanted Esteury Ruiz to be brought up right from Double A. I think that he needs more at bats and stuff in Triple A now. Uh, is September do you think that would be a realistic timeline to bring him up if he keeps performing well? Because right when he got to Triple A, ever since he's got to Triple A, rather, he's been hanging in there and playing pretty well. Just kind of like how CJ Abrams was playing pretty well before he was brought up because of Manny's injury.
Yeah, I just was popping up his stats here on my computer. I think he's hitting 422 in his couple weeks in AAA. Yeah, it's hard to look at the AAA stats because El Paso is such a great place to hit. It's a real
Right.
launching pad. I think the key that you're looking at with him probably is how much contact he's making. He's striking out about 25% of the time, which is probably a little bit high for wanting to call him up and throw him in the big leagues. But he can really run. He struggled offensively last year. He's doing better this year. He's showing some more patience at the plate. It's hard to say. Like I think he's a prospect. I don't think he's a top prospect, despite his overall numbers. He's hitting 360 right now with 13 homers, and he's got plus speed. But yeah, I think he's a guy that like you said, the Padres like to see some more of him at AAA. He's barely played at that level, and if he keeps producing consistently there, then you give him a shot sometime. Maybe August, maybe September, depending on what the team needs at that point.
Yeah. And these props, right? We talk about Ruiz, just talked about Abrams a little bit, and last time I had you on, we were talking about Gore, and he's hit a little bit of a rough patch. Moving to kind of, I wasn't talking with you about this before we came on, but some other like smaller names. Is there someone in AAA or AA that you think would be able to impact this team at some point this season? I know that's a general question, and not like I'm not talking about like a specific position, but if you have anyone in mind that sticks out to you, is there anyone?
I mean, I don't know, like a big impact. I mean, you might have guys who could, fill in, like a Rosario or a Reese
Right.
Neer, or maybe Cops comes up from Double A. I think we've talked about him a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think they have a guy who you're gonna have come in and he's gonna get regular at bats or a high leverage role out of the bullpen. It's more, I think for the most part, most of their guys who are capable of making an impact are up. I mean, you have Campusano's in AAA. If they needed him, but I think that's more like if an opening was created in San Diego as opposed to him forcing his way into lineup. And I like Campusano, but I still feel I still kind of in the back of my mind thinking like he's going to wind up contributing to Padres more as a piece of trade bait, honestly. Than I think they've been. Yeah, I know Nola hasn't had a great year. Alfaro's been pretty good when he's been in there. Like I still like if like like we always think AJ Preller's on the verge of making another trade, right?
Mhm.
And I feel like the next time they make a trade, like Luis Campusano might if they're might be the key prospect they give up. Not that no reflection on him. I've always kind of sensed I feel like he's more trade bait than he's a guy who's going to be a fixture in the lineup.
'Cause I think, and I kinda agree with you on that, because they just haven't given him that consistent opportunity in the big leagues when they call him up. Like, when they call him up earlier this year, I thought, "Okay, team every day," you know? I think when Voit was hurt, like, do it. Give him the chance, and he got, like, 12 or 14 outs during the time, and then he was sent right back down.
No, you're right. I mean, he just has, and it's never been a situation when they said, "Here, take the job and run with it." I mean, in their defense, the 2 year time, I mean, he's been up the last 2 years and he's 5 for 49. So it's not like even in part time, play that he's torn it up. But it's also hard to produce when you're not getting regular at bats. And sometimes when you're trying to break in the big leagues and you feel like you're on a short leash, that makes it a little bit tougher too. But yeah, like I said, I think he's a talented guy. He's on our top 100 prospects list. But I've always sensed that he's the next time they make a big trade, Luis Campusano is going to be the key prospect going to the other team.
Yeah. And we can move now to the MLB Draft Combine that I've seen last Friday. You were at it, I was at it, MLB Network at it, and all of the teams, the GMs, they were all there scouting. Well, tons of scouts that I saw in the stands evaluating. Who was that pitcher? Was it the switch pitcher?
Yeah,
They all. I
Durangelo
noticed.
St. was there. Everybody was interested in seeing him. Yep.
Yeah, because I noticed they all like came down and had their radar guns, and then I looked up when he was done, and they weren't there anymore. So that's not my question, but what was the main thing that these GMs, the AJ Prellers of the world, were trying to get out of it? Was it the medicals? Obviously, there were unique cases where some guys, pitchers, this was last night that they were pitching in front of scouts before draft, and it was just an update to make sure it was healthy, the velocity, that stuff was there. But is it the medicals and, like, the mobility stuff and the interviews are the big things that the GMs were looking at?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'd say it's fair to say that the off-field stuff was more important than the on-field stuff because, like you were suggesting, Ben, like the college guys who are there taking BP or throwing a bullpen, you've seen those guys over a long college season, and the high school guys you've seen on the showcase circuit all last summer and again this spring. I mean, I'd say the guy whose on-field performance mattered the most was Connor Prelip, a potential first round pick, Alabama lefty who had Tommy John surgery last year and hadn't pitched. He'd thrown one bullpen on May 23rd, about 12 months after he had the surgery. So this was literally the second time teams got to see him throw. And I think that's going to be before the draft. So I think for him it mattered. And he looked good in his 3.5 minute bullpen. But the other stuff I think is what the teams really value even more. Because again, they've gotten lots of on field looks at these guys, but face to face interviews with a lot of players everybody I've talked to, teams and players, talks about how that's the highlight of the combine. They said it last year. They said it this year. They like the fact that last year it was in North Carolina and the on-field stuff was at the USA Baseball Training Site, which is a really nice site, but it wasn't set up so you could interview players there. 30 teams interview players there, so you would do the interviews back at the hotel and you'd have to run back and forth. This year it was at Petco. The on-field stuff's obviously on the field, and then they just took the suites. Every team had a suite, so the players could go from suite to suite to all their appointments. They did the performance testing was on the concourse. They're running 30-yard dashes and doing broad jumps and force plate testing, that type of stuff. And then they changed the rules, and this was a positive change, I really think, this year. MLB for years, the teams have hoped to get medical information on players before the draft. But the problem is, if I'm a player, what's my incentive to give you that medical information? It can only be used to hurt me. It doesn't help me. I have no guarantee. And so last year, I think very few players did medicals. I think this year, I don't have a final count, but I think it was going to be like 170, 180 players who were there. Like about 70% of the 250 or so guys were going to do physicals because they changed the rule. And now, if you do a complete physical at the combine, if you're invited to the combine, you do a complete physical, then you are guaranteed at least 75% of the slot for the pick where you're taken in the draft. Like a team can't say, hey, Ben, like, we don't like the way your elbow looks. We're going to only give you, a quarter of what the bonus slot is, or you can just go to college. Like now, unless it's some new injury that's cropped up, but if it's based on, if nothing has changed, it protects a player. And so there is an incentive for guys to do, especially if you're a pitcher. You'd rather, the pitching stuff's very subjective. And when you do team physicals, the only person whose opinion matters is the team doctor. If you fail, say the Padres physical, you don't get to say, well, I'm going to go get a second opinion. It's like, no, the Padres are relying on their doctor, and they just say, hey, Ben, sorry, we don't like your shoulder. But the thing is, so the pitching stuff is very subjective, and there's wear and tear, obviously, on any pitcher's arm. So in the case of a pitcher, say, there might be 20 teams that don't like the way a guy's shoulder looks, and 10 teams who are fine with it. And you're better off, if I'm the pitcher, getting drafted by a team that likes the way your shoulder looks or is fine with it, rather than you get drafted and then teams like, oh, wow, we don't like this, we're not going to sign you. Or like if you're a player and maybe you have like a minor back condition and 5 teams are like, you know what, we can't take that guy. At least they know that now beforehand, and they aren't going to take you, and you don't get stuck by getting taken by a team that's not going to let you pass their physical. So I think that was a positive. And, the on-field stuff, I mean, it's fun to watch, guys swinging for the fences. And, Jacob Mizorowski from Crowder Junior College threw over 100 miles an hour and averaged 99.8. Like, that stuff's fun. I think you kind of knew that about a lot of those guys. But I do think, I look at that stuff, it's a way to promote the game too. These aren't players that a lot of America is familiar with, unless you're a super diehard, draft fan. And it's kind of, talking to players. They do a lot of interviews with the guys. You get a sense of their personality. Termar Johnson was great when they had him on the desk during the Friday workout. And so I look at it as non-field stuff's a way to promote the game. And I think that's good for baseball as well.
Yeah, and more about the interviews in those suites and all that. Like, so to your knowledge, they had players like scheduled throughout the day, and it's
Correct.
pretty much just getting to know them and just answer questions that a typical player prospect, would have to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sessions were 25 or 30 minutes long. Now, you obviously, you could talk to players after. You can't work out players anymore after the combine.
Right.
Again, tied to the physicals. They don't want guys getting hurt after doing a physical at the combine. But you could talk to players afterward. You could do Zooms. You could theoretically fly to meet with them, whatever you want, or bring them in to your place and meet with them. You can still do that, but it's a way, like most of your area scouts will have talked to players, especially if it's a high priority target for the team. They'll have talked to the players, but if you're AJ Preller, and AJ, obviously loves scouting, AJ can't go around and do home visits with like 30 players,
Right.
All over the place, because he's got other stuff going on too. And it's a way for a bunch of people in your organization to meet the guy, where maybe the area guy met him, or maybe the cross checkers met him. This way you can have a number of people in your organization meet the guy. And everybody, like the players love it, the teams love it. And like you said, yeah, you're not, I think that occasionally, I don't think there's tough questions necessarily being asked where you're grilling the guy. It's not like the NFL Combine where you're, having the quarterback get up on the whiteboard and diagram a play and what you read and all that, or you're throwing a play at him and trying to see how well he reacts under pressure. I don't think there's so much of that. It's more, I think, for both sides to kind of get a feel for each other. And like I said, I mean, I've talked to a number of players who went to the combine last year who were there this year. I've talked to a number of teams who, have participated in the process, and everybody really, really likes the interview. I would say the interviews are probably the best part of the combine for most people.
Mhm. Now with the Padres, they have, I think, the 15th pick in the first one this year. We know in the past AJ Preller has been big on up the middle guys, the versatility, because he believes that they're either going to stick there or they can go move other spots, and I like that philosophy as well. Um, do you think he's focused on pitching in the first round or more just continuing to be athletic up the middle?
I think it's really a case of best player available, and it's a weird year because so many of the best pitching prospects have gotten hurt. I'm not saying they wouldn't take a pitcher, like you hear them mention with Dylan Lesko a decent amount. I mean, I'll point out we're still a month before the draft, and nobody really knows who's taking it. But you hear them mention with Dylan Lesko, who would have probably been the first pitcher taken in the draft. He's a high school kid, but he had Tommy John surgery this spring. He blew out. But he healthy. He would have been the first pitcher I think taken college or high school. They haven't been afraid to make moves like that. I know they've worked out like a number of the high school shortstops, whether it's Justin Crawford, who's Carl's son, or Jet Williams, or Cole Young. Which kind of fits what you were saying, Ben. It doesn't mean they're going to take one of those guys, but I feel like they've worked out every high school shortstop who could go with that pick. They've worked them out. I think when you're picking 15, you just got to let the draft come to you. Like I
Right.
think there's probably only going to be my over under would be maybe 2 pitchers who get taken before them just because of the way this draft is. There's some great high school hitters at the top, and there's some really good depth college, position player wise. But it's weird. Like we're still a month out, and I don't even think a lot of teams have had their meetings or set their boards or really kind of zeroed in on who they're picking yet. So you just kind of hear a bunch of different rumors. But if I had to guess, I might go high school shortstops just because that kind of fits what they've done in the past, and I know they've worked out a lot of those guys. But it's also possible that maybe the high school shortstops I like the most are gone before they pick. So it's still kind of early.
What about Kumar Rocker? He's obviously fascinating. The Mets picked him last year, and they didn't like what they saw with the medicals, I believe.
That's correct.
Now he's pitching in pro ball. Uh, are the Padres? I saw. I think it was in the Athletic. It was them and like the Angels that have been really looking at him. Where
Well,
would he even like go?
here's the thing, and I'm not disparaging anybody else's mock. Nobody knows where Kumar Rocker is going to go right now. All 30 teams are watching him. It's not just 2 teams on him. The
Right.
question is like you just said, Ben. So last year he went 10th overall in the draft, had a great career at Vanderbilt. Mets agreed to a $6 million bonus. Does the physical. Mets don't like it. The Mets offered him $0. They had to make him an offer so they could get the 11th pick in this year's draft as compensation, but they didn't want to sign him. So they literally offered him $0. So there's something going on there, but we don't know what it is. And I just think it's hard to say this team's on him. Like, it's funny. I got asked a bunch in San Diego. I got asked a bunch before I got to San Diego. I've asked a bunch of people, same thing, like, what's going to happen with Rocker? And I think until teams get some sense of what they're dealing with medically, it's impossible to say. Like, teams are scouting him. He's pitched 3 times in indie ball. I think he's pitched 10 or 11 innings in 3 starts. It's controlled outings. Stuff's look good. He's hit the upper 90s. Sliders look pretty good. As you might suspect, because he hadn't pitched in a year, the command and control have been slightly rusty at times. It's not really much in the way of competition, so it's hard to read a lot into it, except, the stuff looks good. But, if you were just drafting purely on the stuff, yes, he could go in the middle of the first round. But considering that a team was thrilled to get him, was willing to pay him $6 million and walked away, I don't think anybody would draft him without knowing what you're dealing with physically. You're going to have to see some kind of medical report. Like, you aren't going to just take the guy and then be like, oh, we'll take our chances and see what the medical looks like. Like, he is throwing well. That's a positive. But, and I've asked people, and people have asked me, I don't think anybody has any sense of how much information they're going to get and when that will be. I know I've kind of taken the easy way out, and I've just said, until people see his medical information, I haven't projected him in the first round because I just don't know how you can anywhere you put him in a mock draft is 100% a guess because nobody knows what they're dealing with.
Right. And you mentioned the medicals, like for him, and you talked about this earlier, doing the medicals that could end up just being a real negative towards him.
Well, he didn't do a
But
medical. He didn't go to the combine, so he
right,
didn't
no,
do
I
that. Yeah,
understand
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I understand that. But I'm saying if he ever did, then that wouldn't be great for him. It could
Well,
not
the
be
thing
great
is,
sometimes
he
for
won't
him.
do something. He won't do a medical exam before the draft. But like whoever
Okay.
drafts him will do a post draft medical, well, which
Right.
they'll do a team will do anyway, even if a guy did a medical at the combine in case something cropped up. But like you would want to have like copies of the medical exam the Mets did to know what the Mets didn't like, or if he's had maybe he did a medical exam on his own this spring. Have copies of that. I mean, I would suspect they probably have done some sort of medical exam this spring because you want to know what you're dealing with. And if I were a team, I'd be like, I need to see some medical records because I got to know what we're dealing with.
And
And it's just it's yeah.
what I would say to that is, wouldn't it be good for him to, present that to teams if it is positive so that he could be in that first round? Because what you're
Yeah.
saying, if the
Yeah.
medicals are good, then he would be in the first round.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, and like again, I'm not a doctor, and like nobody really know. I mean, the Mets haven't really talked about at all about what happened. So like teams don't really know. But like I would be surprised if the Mets would totally have walked away from $6 million deal. They thought they were getting a steal, getting Kumar Rocker at 10, if they didn't see something. So like I would think that there's got to be something that's at least subject to interpretation in the medicals. But like I said, it's just I don't know how you could take him without seeing some sort of medical report to have an idea of what you're dealing with. And like and like it would behoove him as well. I don't think you'd want a situation where he gets drafted. Like again, I don't know how you draft him without knowing the medical reports are, but like he gets drafted and team doesn't really know what it's dealing with, and they do a physical and they're like, "Well, we don't like this either," and we're walking away. So I would suspect some medical reports of some sort will be released to teams. I just don't. Nobody seems to know when that will be or how detailed they'll be. Because like even if he throws 97, 99 miles an hour, in these 3 or 4 inning starts, and he does that 6 or 7 times, okay, that's good. I mean, obviously that's encouraging. I still want to know why the Mets walked away. So
Right.
that's just a hard situation to figure out because it's all just speculating about what his health is. And I mean, yeah, he looks good on the mound right now, but how do you really know? Like, I would like to know what the Met like if I'm going to pay him millions of dollars, I have to know what the Mets saw that scared them off. Like I'm not just drafting him in the middle of the first round and saying, okay, we're going to give him, $3-4 million and we'll just take our chances. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I agree. It's fascinating to me. And the draft's coming up next month, so we'll be waiting for that. Thank you so much, Jim, for joining the show. This has been episode 186 of the Talking Friars podcast and YouTube show presented by Gaglione Bros, famous cheesesteaks and garlic fries. For Ben Fadden, Jim Callis. See everyone later. Hope you guys enjoy watching the Padres tonight.